You cannot have an excuse. You know that we keep time. Can you explain yourself, please?
I cannot. I have no excuses. I apologize. It won't happen again.
It won't happen again. Thank you. Apology accepted. Mr. Mnisi, I assume that because I think you jumped, you were dealing with the columned document around page, I think, 18. I'm not asking you to go back at this stage, but I assume at some stage you will go back there and take it from there. Or unless I missed something.
Chairperson, on the tabulated, the summary of the events was a quick snapshot view of what I've been going through now.
Okay.
So I'm now.
I'm not stopping you. But I'm just saying. I assume that at some point you will go back there.
I'll go back to summarize what we
All
just
right.
discussed.
Okay. Please continue.
Thank you, Chair. I'm now moving to paragraph 90, where I start setting out the sequence of events and proceedings which occurred on the separate PACs being the 4th, 18th, and 25th of September, respectively. So on page 22, sworn statement, paragraph 90, I start dealing with what happened and what transpired on the 4th of September, 2025. This report was presented by the BEC Chairperson, Mr. Victor Hopper, to the Bid Adjudication Committee at its meeting held on the 4th of September 2025, Chair. During the deliberations, the BEC raised a number of substantive concerns regarding the evaluation outcomes and the content of the report. Key among these were the absence of a clear justification for not recommending the highest scoring bidder across the various regions, as well as inconsistencies which were observed in the allocation of bidders to regions, including instances where the lower ranked or more expensive bidder were recommended without explanation. The BAC further noted concerns relating to the pricing and commercial viability. BAC indicated that certain bidders may have quoted unrealistically low prices, potentially affecting their ability to deliver on the required service, and confirmed that at least one of the bidders had acknowledged their inability to perform at the quoted rates in writing. However, the BAC found that these considerations were not sufficiently documented or substantiated within the report that was presented to the BAC. Additional concerns, including the absence of a final probity report confirming that all identified risks, compliance issues had been adequately addressed, Chair. The lack of clarity on unit pricing and fee structures, particularly the inclusion of as and when required, which was key for this tender, and insufficient detail on the methodology applied to allocating regions to bidders. The BAC also raised concerns and compliance issues regarding operational practices, specifically the potential use of service providers across multiple regions without explicit provision in the tender specifications and the absence of clarity on the legal implications of such arrangements. Considering the above, the BAC resolved to refer the report back to BEC for revision. The committee indicated that it was not satisfied that the report adequately addressed critical issues related to bidder selection, to pricing, to integrity, probity confirmation, compliance with specifications of the bid, and the transparency of allocation methodology. The BEC was requested to address these matters comprehensively prior to submission to resubmission. The resolution here under has been attached as Annexure GM15 in the second bundle. GM15, Chair, has been catered for on 343 on the second bundle. So what we see on GM15, Chair, is an actual Bid Adjudication Committee resolution, which outlines the recommendations which were brought on board by the BEC. It gives the clear explanation or guidance in terms of what transpired during the meeting and what were the concerns that were raised. We'll take note for argument's sake, Chair, on page 346. On 346 of this Annexure GM15, we summarized that it was agreed, therefore, that the report be referred back to BEC on the basis that BEC was not comfortable with the following. 1, the pricing per award leads to bulk pricing, and some of the pricing in the fee structures are as and when. BEC further notes that as and when is not standard pricing. The report does not provide any explanation as to why the highest scoring bidder has not been recommended.
Can you please explain the concept of as and when pricing?
So, Chairperson, it's a rate-based appointment, meaning there will not be illegal invasions every day. So if we do an appointment without clearly stipulating as and when, the bidders might take advantage of that and submit a monthly invoice, even when there was no work that has been done in terms of removal of illegal structures or invasion.
Oh, thank you.
The third aspect is that we as BAC were fully aware that this bid underweight property. However, the final property report was not provided to the BAC at this stage, confirming that all the concerns that were raised had been addressed. Concerns in terms of service provided used across all regions was a massive provision which wasn't catered for in the specifications. There was no clarity in terms of methodology used in terms of allocating regions to specific bidders. On the basis of that region, Chairperson, it was resolved that this tender be referred back by the acting chairperson of that day, as I was not in. I am the chairperson of BAC. If I'm not in, I am delegated to appoint an acting chairperson. On the Bid Adjudication Committee, we sat on the 4th of September. The Governance and Support Officer, who is a senior manager, was acting as the chairperson of the day.
But you were part of the process. It's just that when the document was signed, you were not there on the day.
No, Chair. I was not present at the BAC that sat on the 4th of September. I had appointed an acting chairperson to preside over the meeting on my behalf.
Again, it's just to try and understand how it works. So where you were reading now, second bullet, for example, it says the report does not provide, this is the BEC report you're referring to, it does not provide any explanation as to why the highest scoring bidder has not been recommended. Now, isn't it the function of the BAC to make its own determination on the basis of the report that you have received? Because you've received a report, and then you have members of the BEC, as you explained, attending that meeting. You ask them questions, and they respond and provide clarifications. If the report of the BEC, according to your determination as a BAC, there's the highest bidder who should have been recommended, is that not a determination that the BAC then makes instead of referring that back to the BAC? I'm just trying to understand how things work in practice, in fact.
In practice, Chair, had the BAC make a determination, there will be a breach in lines in terms of the delegation of authorities. 3 processes can be undertaken from a BAC. You can recommend for the award, you can cancel the bid if the irregularities or the issues picked up are uncurable in nature. 3, you can refer the matter back to the BEC for reconsideration. So in this instance, there was no certainty as to why. The report was not substantive in terms of why is this bidder, who appears to be the cheapest, not awarded. Yes, as the BEC, you give us a letter saying this particular bidder had confirmed, you tell the BEC that the bidder said they're unable to deliver. Their prices that they quoted, they will not be able to execute the work. But that's not attached in the BAC report, meaning when you do come back to BAC, we expect that letter authorized by that specific service provider who was the highest scoring bidder at this stage. So we don't make a directive because there will be a breach of process. We have to allow the BEC to make a determination. There must be consensus throughout the process. We make a determination, in some instance, it might not be well informed. So we need to ensure that the committee reevaluates this. They could come back to BAC and say, this bidder has not been awarded because of these reasons. We'll then have an opportunity to interact with the reasons that have been provided, either agree with them or disagree with them on the way forward. If this issue, for example, were to come up on the second round, Chair, and we're still uncertain, BAC could make a provision that we are now either uncertain whether we could proceed with this, irregularities that we are identifying are not cured, we will recommend for a cancellation of this bid. Or we have now received adequate explanation in terms of why this higher scoring bidder was not awarded, at which stage it might have fallen off the bandwagon, and then move ahead with the recommendation. So we'll not give a directive, we'll allow an opportunity for the committee to elaborate on this matter so that there's consensus throughout. We wouldn't want to force a decision down a committee, Chair. The delegation and segregation of authorities don't allow that at all.
Okay, thank you.
Chairperson, I will now move back to the sworn statement on page 24 in a positive way. 1, we're able to plan accordingly. to reduce irregular expenditure that is incurred by the city. But Chair, I think I will break down further within my statement on that particular tender and what actually transpired in each of the events where the extensions were considered by the BAC.
Mr. Mnisi, just to understand the sequence of the process. So the BC does its evaluation.
Yes.
And then they have a report. Is it at that point that probity is brought in?
Yes.
The probity authority is brought in at that point?
Yes.
Appointed by the city manager?
Yes, and the Chief Audit Executive.
And the chief?
Chief Audit Executive.
Okay. And then where does the probity report serve once it's done?
Once it's done, it's presented to the BEC. The findings
Yes.
are presented and deliberated at the BEC.
Okay.
They are given an opportunity to make the necessary corrections. Once consensus has been reached between probity team and the BEC, then it's served to the BAC for further consideration.
Okay. So where you've had to return as a BAC, you've had to return a report or a process to the BEC to address the probity concerns. What does it mean for the process that you've described? Does it mean the BEC did not address the concerns in the probity report but simply submitted to the BAC, and you then said, but you haven't addressed this? I'm trying to understand the process as you explain it. This is how it's supposed to happen, and what in fact would have happened in the situation that you explained to us, that you've had to turn it back.
Indeed, Chair, you are spot on. That's exactly what it means. It means BAC is identifying a notable difference between the final probity report and the BEC report. In this case, it was as a result of bid number 2 from Security Services, where that bid, from a probity perspective, said, nope, the irregularities here, you shouldn't award this. BAC says, no, we have had our interaction with the probity team. We have cleared this. But at BAC, they're not providing us with conclusive evidence that that has been dealt with accordingly. At BAC, we are sitting in front of us with the BEC report and the probity report. The probity report still indicates deficiencies within bid number 2. Hence, we refer that back for there to either be an official confirmation in the form of an addendum or a confirmation report from probity that indeed we had a discussion with BEC. We are now convinced that bidder number 2, Vamsira Security Services, for an example, is now compliant and should be awarded. They could have came back, Chair, and said, no, this bidder should not have been awarded. We maintain our stance that we did not confirm 1, 2, and 3 issues, which means the BEC must ensure correction. Probity reports, as part of our internal controls, is authoritative in nature. Unless you've got substantive reasons to differ with that, then we'll allow that. Otherwise, Chair, a third-party confirmation is superior from all quarters of the accounting fraternity. The Auditor General relies on a third-party confirmation. This is a third-party confirmation that I would rather place my reliance on than an internal report as well.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get right in my head is where probity, the probity authority has said, this bidder should not have been recommended because they did not submit 3 years audited financials. And then that's 1. 2, this bidder should not have been should not have been recommended because they do not have a 5-ton truck. Those 2 fact-based statements. When it goes back, when that report goes to the BEC, when you say as BAC, let this go back to the BEC to consider what in fact is the BEC to do with it? Do they approach the bidder and say, give us 3 years audited financial statements? Do you now have a 5-ton truck? And then come back to you and say, oh, now they are compliant? Or how exactly is the BEC to fix those two issues that are specifically flagged by probity?
Thanks, Commissioner. In this case, the BEC was confident that all those non-compliant documents were there. They were confident, hence they say to BAC, we have met this, we are certain that 3-year financial statements and confirmation of a 5-ton truck is available. BAC then says, but that's not what property report says, so you go find each other with the property report. Meaning, you either come back with an amended property report signed by the external individual confirming what you are inferring to. If not, we will not move on with the recommendation of this bidder. That brings us now, Chair, to the next item on TM19, which will touch on it as well. So what happens now, Chair, I'm going to go back